Well, good afternoon once again. Welcome to Finapolis. Today we'll be discussing a very acute topic, many-faceted topic, which involves a lot of aspects that including labor and client experience, changes in client experience, and creating new business opportunities. We're going to talk about artificial intelligence, AI, and how can we profit? How do we keep our ethics? How do we provide non-discriminatory measures? The precondition for our discussion. According to some experts, the growth of our industry promises about $16 trillion by 2025, which is more than you can imagine, and it's a pretty large share of a pie. How do we apply AI tools in financial, non-financial activities in our current businesses? What processes can AI influence? Where should we involve it? Where we probably shouldn't? And let me introduce the panelists we're having today. Alan Harper, Global Business Services Cognitive Solutions Leader from IBM Company. Arkady Sandler, Head of Artificial Intelligence Division in MTS. Ron Raffensperger, I'll read it out in English.
Huawei. Give a very warm applause to Ron. George
Held.
Maxim Yeremenko, старший управляющий.
Maxim Yeremenko, Chief Executive from the Sberbank. DataSol's founder Alexei Natekin, and Dmitry Krasyukov, Acting Chief Executive Officer of SAP CIS. So give your applause to our panelists. My name is Ilya Velter, and I'm a Managing Director for Strategy, Innovation, and Corporate Communications, AK Bars Bank. So the first question, which many of you would find topical, AI, do we need it? What advantages does it give us? And I would kindly ask all panelists to share their ideas.
To development of business.
Again, sorry, we do not hear the speaker because whether we need it or not, this question has some negation in it. We are already within this revolutionary tornado, which is promoting AI, and it poses a threat for us. The threat in terms of global changes in all business processes, more than any other previous industrial revolutions.
The landscape, but I think that the point is that AI has the opportunity to completely change the interaction between the customers and the financial institutions, and allow the financial institutions to become much closer in relationship to their customers and be able to tailor the services much more clearly, and obviously creating a competitive advantage at that point.
Thank you. George.
For us, the question is whether we need AI or not. We're past that question. In Beeline, AI is used on a daily basis. In terms of business, 60% of our calls are answered by AI. Recommendation engine for our TV products work is based on AI. So for us, AI is part of our operational work. It allows us to make our business more efficient, both for our clients and create data-driven decision-making process. Well, I'll give you a very simple metaphor. You could come here, driving a horse from Moscow, but for some reasons you're taking a plane to Sochi, or you're taking a car or railroads. So we can make decisions if you have good experts, based on experts. But if you have data that can help these experts, aid experts or replace experts, we can have different, attitude to it. But it would be silly not to use the advantages that AI gives to top 5 companies of the world and many corporations in the world. If we're taking market cap, if it gives them an opportunity to rise where they have risen, it would be silly not to use the, the goods of civilization. Well, I'll try to sum it up with a formula. AI or data science or machine learning, depends on how you want to name it, allows you to answer the core question: how do we offer a proper, relevant product to relevant client at a relevant price? And we've now learned the AI has learned to answer this question. For AI is, first of all, technology. And as any technology, it gives you an opportunity to make the processes cheaper and more efficient. If they are cheaper, they're consumed more, the consumption grows, and it gives space for new economy. So AI can principally change life around us. So today, if machine vision, for example, is part of AI, you can have it at a shop, and you see a customer coming into a shop, and you know who is the customer, how much he has bought, and he'll have his money. His card will be used. So the shopping experience is changing for a customer. I think in the future, AI will change the most basic things we do on a day-to-day basis. Dmitry, I would use your point and do some product placement here. One of the best examples of how you can buy something without, using your card or phone are the projects that are can be seen here. Collect self-to-pay or face-to-pay, when the face is the only form factor that allows you to perform some legally meaningful action. I would ask our colleagues to share their experiences in terms of how we change the client's route and how we improve clients' experience through AI. Maxim, my first question is to you. You represent a major financial institute. What are the solutions that you provide that help improve customers' experience? Well, I'll try to structure it somehow. The majority of the audience are people working in the banks or people who work in collaboration with banks, bank partners. We all know that in early 2000s was trendy. Models of credit risks evaluation, these models were trendy. Others would develop their own solutions. Some would use Basel and first, second, and third. And the most mature trend in financial industry that picked up on this trend. At that time, it wasn't called AI. It was called applied mathematics. At least this is what we called it in Russian. Later, we had machine learning terms, and over the past 2 years, everybody's, saying AI as a mantra. Of course, we're talking about evaluating financial risks, credit risks, market risks. this is what allowed many banks to survive, or vice versa. Those who didn't pay enough attention to these instruments failed. So this is why this is where this interest with Basel Committee and European Central Bank and IFRS. After these two recessions and the crisis, this topic has become very important. So how do we squeeze the last mile from the baseline in terms of the prediction using new data from new sources? The second story is the trend we had 3-5 years ago. I'm talking about clients' experience or customers' experience, or active sales, or tailoring, customizing products. And next best action, next best offer. This is something my colleague mentioned at the plenary session. Next best customer. What do we offer a customer to make them happy on one hand, and on the other hand, for us to get the profit we're planning on. At present, there's a big trend. This is something we're working on. And it is one of the strategic, it is a strategic focus for our team, for my team at least. It's processing natural language, non-structured texts, inquiries, or made by our clients. We need to work with all channels, with the voice, with the call center, chats with operator, chats with chatbots. This is something that clients want from servicing companies, and we need to understand it on one hand. On the other hand, we need to communicate in a proper way. And we also have some basic stuff used. The possibilities that AI offers and big data offers, cyber security, informational security, HR analytics. Because managing people can be more efficient if you understand how these people interact between themselves, and what orders or commissions work better, what people work better together, who perform better, how do you form a team? Maybe you should switch people. So it has all become possible through using data analytics. And our colleagues from one British R&D group, some say that they helped Trump to win. Others said they helped Brexit to happen. But we're talking about personality evaluation, assessing personal characteristics and the way they influence our behavior in the end. So if we're talking behind the curtain about behind the curtain stuff, we are talking about our clients' behavior, about our staff behavior. If we repeat what was said at the first session, we're talking about geopolitics as well. Natural language processing shouldn't be confused with NLP and neuro-linguistics programming. Thank you, Maxim. As a lot of research has been done to recreate a digital portrait of your customer. Means you have an opportunity to analyze their inquiries, their requests. You need to collect data from two sources: banks, from the banks that own up to 45% of information, and telecom operators who also own a lot of information about our everyday life. George, so my first question will be to you. How do you, as a major telecom operator, how do you use conversational AI tools? Many are using them today. What is the next level? What is the next step in developing those systems that you're going to offer your clients? Well, since we're a telecom operator, we have an unfair advantage. We have an unfair advantage compared to other players in the market. Over the past 12 minutes, you've spent about 7 minutes looking at your phone. So this is how we get a lot of information about you. Our AI team would say, I mean, they can predict when the girl will drop her boyfriend 3 days before she actually does it. This is your typical AI case because, you know, human behavior changes. For example, the girl would, you know, be starting wearing a different kind of clothes, change her makeup. So AI can predict. The first time we announced this case in the company, and then girls came up to us. Can you solve this problem for us? We're saying we can find a guy for you, but it's probably not what you're gonna want. But to be serious, creating various models as we're looking at the behavioral characteristics allows us to do a lot of things. First, one of them is recommendation engine. We use it in our TV products. How often do you watch YouTube? You're searching for content when you're watching. So it's only 20% of time you actually consume this content. So the companies that are able to show the relevant content are becoming better players on the market. So recommendation engine in our product is based on AI, and it allows us to know what film you're more likely to watch. Another side of this challenge is using language processing in various chatbots. 63% of all text messages to our call center are processed by chatbots. And it allows us, on one hand, to relieve people working with the tasks they don't find interesting, so they won't have to answer questions like, what tariff should I use, or how do I switch to a different tariff? People want to work with more creative products. For example, we have a product, well, when you get a certain number of megabytes of data after you make 10,000 steps, for example. How do you count megabytes if you're using an electric scooter driving to work? So AI is part of business, is an essential part of business, and I gave you 2 examples. AI is used in machine learning, and it is being perfected all the time. So when people are interacting with chatbots, these chatbots have to understand what's the difference between, you know, white and brown bread. So you're building up your communication, knowing the kind of the client you're working with. So the engines the chatbots that are worked on the basis of AI help us work with retail, for example.
There are other differences in regional language and regional works in St. Petersburg and Moscow language. And the chatbots really show us the list of those regional words, how the same concepts are told in different cities, are described in different cities. Thank you. As a while ago in a larger university, we've heard that they built a model enabling to define the psychological type of a user using only 3% Facebook, and the outcome will be much better than a psychologist working for years for this person. And if we take 10 likes, then we will be able to dive deep into psychological analysis, and it will be much more correct than than the psychologist does. I know that there are similar stories with the telecommunications operators, but I would like to ask how you use those tools in small and middle-sized corporations for your customers, for your SME customers. This is a question for me, I believe. Yeah, that's it. Overall, small and medium-sized enterprises SMEs do not differ that much from natural persons. And what my colleague just told you about chatbots, about the knowledge about the customer, this is very much commonplace and everyone uses. This is not the issue of assembling this together, but this is rather all about what decisions you make based on the data. And this is where the competition starts. This is where the challenges start. Because this is how you manage the customer relations. And this was a good point, content-related questions. And creation of a sound text, this is of an understandable text. This is the most difficult thing that a human can actually make. This is the cognitive function. This is combining sounds into words that make sense and to convey meaning. And of course, we are all used to it. We are using it right now without even thinking about it. We are now making some high-level neural actions. We are at a conference to boast, to show off our skills and our high neural skills. These are the people who get invited into the large conferences because they are the best in this neural activities. By making this, we transmit some sort of content, and this creates a diversity and a large number of different possibilities of how things can go. And this is the crucial thing which changes communication, which changes business. Because if you ask a robot, if you make a robot service your customers, then you realize that it is actually not that important how long this conversation should be. Customer satisfaction is the thing you care about, because the time the bot converses with the customer is equal 0. This is not the same in your call centers when you pay 100 rubles per minute. You can, of course, calculate the price of a conversation in a call center. I think 100 rubles per minute is about the price you pay, right? Well, no one shakes their head, so I believe this is true. And robot, when a bot talks with your customers, this costs around 0. And you don't care about how long this conversation can be. So you can introduce additional content in this conversation, and you can gain lots of information about the user, about the customer, enriching your understanding about the customer. This is not about analyzing clicks. You are analyzing answers to direct questions. And people are very enthusiastic about talking with bots, and they are telling them things they would not tell to a live operator. This is the effect. Talking about SMEs, this is, I think, quite the same. The requirements of SMEs could be different sometimes, so we shift the content. We introduce a more relevant content into the conversations with them. Thank you. You've talked about bots, robots, and people share a lot more with robots. Is this true? People are more sincere talking with the robots? Well, a chatbot is a robot, is a non-physical robot. He's a chatting robot, so it is chatbot. So it is correct to use the word robot here. And yes, because I'm involved into conversational interfaces for 6 to 7 years already, I've seen a lot of solutions here, and I've seen lots of use cases. I read the logs, chat logs, and I collected lots of stats, and yes, this is true. When you are honest with him, when you do not hide the fact that this is a bot talking with him, and the bot is made in a proper way when it's really interesting to converse with him, with it, you, of course, need lots of experts, not only a linguist, not only a programmer, but lots of different experts for this. But people do converse a lot with bots. 30 to 40% of the dialects are not about the service. And if a bot is able to entertain, then people just love to chat with a bot. People joke a lot and receive a joke as a reply. So it's a channel of communications you can develop if you want to know more about your client. And all of the colleagues sitting here in this room keep enriching your models by talking with, by conversing, interacting with their interfaces. Continuing the robot team, and you know the news probably. In the British Parliament, there was a hearing. A bot was talking to the British Parliament. A bot developed it in one of the British universities, and the bot told about how he helps elderly people manage their day-to-day tasks. So, and I also think that there's an example in Saudi Arabia when a robot was granted citizenship, fully fledged citizenship, quite recently. So, talking about the robots, any process related to implementing AI meets resistance in different companies, because it normally signifies you won't need me any longer after you implement this process. That's what our employees think. This what our customers are telling us, and I don't think this is the news for our economic situation. I would like to ask our colleagues with a global experience, understanding that how are those tools understood at the customer level, at the company level? Is the perception of those tools, is the acceptance of those tools, AI tools, different in different countries and different cultures? You know some cases about this?
The cultural difference in accepting the instruments of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, good question. So I get to travel around different countries looking at implementations and the affinity towards AI. And I happen to live in Tokyo, Japan. And the Japanese have been, they're a very technically advanced country and have been for many years. And AI is not new there. AI has been there, 10, 15 years in commercial applications. And so the Japanese are very au fait, familiar with AI. And one example of that is humanoid robots. Pepper the robot you might have seen that Mizuho uses in their branches. And the robot, you actually go in there and the robot can direct you to a branch teller, can answer questions in natural language and sometimes multiple languages, and even offer marketing advice. So you've got this humanoid robot, half the size of a person, engaging with you. Now, I'm an Australian, and if you did that in Australia, it'd probably be beaten or stolen, or there's no kind of receptive view of robots. So there's a real cultural difference. The Japanese would accept it and engage, have a conversation with a robot in natural language. Other cultures not so. In terms of how different countries or cultures are using AI, it is different. So the Japanese, I've found, are very much front office focused, as are our colleagues from America. There's a lot of visibility around customer experience. This is the nature of Americans, isn't it? It's sort of a high profile, in your face, your personas, that kind of thing. So there's a heavy focus on customer experience. My sense is when I come here and I speak to my Russian colleagues, and I know there's probably a lot of mathematicians and data scientists in the audience, the focus is very much on squeezing value out of data, sort of information arbitrage, mathematical advances in analytics, and applying the science of that to banking problems. So there's just kind of this mid-office spin that I'm seeing here. And how to scale that is the challenge. How do you scale that, your data science and modelling capabilities across an organisation? So that would be a kind of a generic impression of what I see of Russia. If I look at Europe, my experience there has been very much on RPA, robotics in combination with AI to take cost out of the back office. And I think that's a legacy of many of the European banks being conglomerates of lots of different component banks with multiple back offices and convoluted processes. So, but that said, there's definitely a convergence, and a convergence on AI enterprise-wide. So front, mid, and back office.
Thank you, Ron. And the same question, you have an extensive experience in working with the facial recognition, verification, and authentication systems behind which there's always an AI engine. And what cultural differences and the problems with acceptance you have observed in your practice?
So I think that the biggest issue, so I live in China, and the acceptance of facial recognition in China is very high. But people are starting to worry. So the facial recognition gets applied to solve specific problems. Like the Shanghai airport has announced that you'll be able to do everything from, doing checking in through going through the boarding gate entirely based on your face. Now that's great, but now if they tie that into the public security facial recognition system, now the public security people know where you are at every instance. And this has now been extended to the subway systems in Shenzhen. You go through a small tunnel before you go into security to get on a metro train, and there's face recognition that's going on there. And people are starting to worry that there's too much knowledge, right? In the enterprise side, or the financial in particular, we see the same focus that Alan mentioned around trying to improve the mid-office and the back office. In Europe, definitely it's about the back office. How do you be able to improve that? So, but facial recognition, I think, is just an indicator of it has a lot of different benefits, but if you're not careful, it can fall across into having some unintended consequences. And we've seen that using AI in credit authorizations and fraud detection, that in certain cases that it certainly has brought a lot of benefits. It certainly provides much faster authentication, much better, but it has some inherent biases that don't show up until it's actually been deployed at scale. People don't feel like they've been treated fairly, and because so often AI is kind of a black box, it's how do you ask that question of, well, wait a minute, why wasn't I allowed to do this? Or what caused me to, you suddenly canceled my credit card when I was overseas, and you can't explain why. So I think that the whole thing about AI is it needs to become much more transparent about how it's being used, where it's being connected, and what the likely impacts to the person are.
Спасибо. И даже несмотря на то, что основной тренд...
Yes, thank you very much. Despite the overall trend towards transparency in the AI, there is a resistance related to implementation of those tools. Dmitry, speaking as a SAP executive officer, where do you see the application fields where the AI technologies will be implemented in the future, and where AI will be reduced and shifted towards manual power? Our global and local practice, there are some pilot projects and projects already running in production. For instance, BASF generates or distributes bank statements using AI to 94%. This frees up around 10 employees as of now, but it's a currently working solution. We also have pilot projects in Russia in the oil and gas industry, where the payment management systems use AI with internal data taken from contracts and external data about the exchange rates, about the good status, about the contract, about the term, and to determine the payment date. So the financial industry, I believe, profits and from AI and has pilot projects using AI. And there are also experimental personal management, staff management projects. Some of the banks are presented here. These are smart career management systems when the AI system can predict the probability of getting a raise for an employee by analyzing some amount of data. Of course, this requires some amount of data, so it's only viable in large companies. And so you can build your career using AI as well. Personnel management and recruiting process is also done by AI. The search for CVs is done using artificial intelligence. This is the positive side. This is a positive example which we can name. But there are failed examples as well. Like the one we've created. We've created a chatbot, a business trip planning chatbot. But the current process is much simpler. And the chatbot we've developed has not enjoyed lots of usage. And we figured out that we rather have it as a auxiliary tool rather than a fully fledged planning chatbot.
I have a question to Alexei. You, in a better sense, you're trying to work with the creative areas of application of human, neural activity. We're talking about art and poetry, and you're already, having competitions where you build up algorithms that imitate, for example, creating poetry in the Russian classics style. What is left to the human being? I mean, what do people do? Journalists, bloggers, people who do creative writing. Oh, we'll discuss it now. Do we have poets in the audience? Designers? Illustrators? So when it's not a creative audience, well, why one wouldn't expect a lot of illustrators at a banking conference. But let me tell you about this event. Our colleagues from Sberbank, we had a contest on machine learning for experts in machine learning, people who can actually do things. And the contest was as follows. You can ask an algorithm to generate a poem in the style of Pushkin or Mayakovsky, and you give them a topic. For example, you want to write a birthday poem for your friend, and this algorithm would generate a poem for you. Or you want to write a poem for your colleague who didn't manage to meet the date, or you can, you want to write a poem to a girl. If you predict that a girl is going to drop her boyfriend, what kind of message you send her, poetic message. See, there's always an input, a human input in all these tasks. And there is always something we can get from the algorithm as well. You can see that I have long hair, so I'm kind of creative. Most of the creative tasks are not as creative. The most difficult thing is to create a concept, is to, make some drafts. And then you work with them, you perfect them, you make them, ideal. And algorithms can actually help us with that, both with graphic design and with generating a text and with bringing together different things. For example, we can ask an algorithm to to work with a photo, to amend a photo. I guess many of you would have a Prisma application or Vinci app, or maybe you've heard about them. What do these apps do? They make your photos better. They make your photos more creative. In fact, they just perform some crazy function. You could do it in Photoshop yourself, but here you only need to click once and you get an image. What do we do next? You can write a text. For example, you want to write a short copyright, advertising an event, let's say. We already have solutions that can help you rewrite this text. The solution would tell you, your text sucks, and they will give you tips on how you can rewrite it. We can go further. For example, you've designed a website, and you decide that, well, this is the way I see it. This is how I see my design. Let's move to production. In fact, you can launch an algorithm here, and this is where AI comes handy. Maybe my colleagues who work with vending machines or other machines, you can take this website and make it more personal, customize it. For example, your designer says, well, this button should be green. This is how I see it. And you can, together with an algorithm, you can say, well, our designer thinks that the button should be green. But let us make our algorithm check through, another 1,000 shades and see how this button could look like. Should it be opaque or something? And test it on customers and see what combinations of this design would provide more feedback. It's a creative task to create a website, to design a website. However, algorithm can help you work through various options for a design. Well, your designer might not have found the best solution. You can copyright a text. It can help you amend certain images and customize them for the audience. Well, you shouldn't be casting shadow on designers. Well, maybe I'm casting a shadow on designers, taking into consideration that we have people who are going to hire them in the future. However, all these tasks help you perfect something. When you have a task in the very first place, you cannot tell AI, well, look, AI, can you create me a website about a new banking product? You can start, you can do some basic work. You can work with some algorithms, but you cannot exclude a human being from this story. You can reduce the amount of pain when people are trying to rewrite their text 100 times. You can reduce time and resources that you use to perfect your materials, but you cannot exclude a human being. A human being is going to do this. What I've told you is a bit different from the initial contest we did with the Sberbank. Our algorithms had to generate poems. However, it was a radical case. The question was, can you today, using an algorithm, write a poem? And I'll give you a spoiler. You can, but sometimes, not always. Can we do without creative professions in the future? No, somebody has to come up with the basis to work from. And the basis and algorithms cannot enjoy works of art. Well, you're not right. Depends on the function you assign to them. You can, for example, say that algorithms works better in case they enjoy their results aesthetically, compared to how Arkady, I can see Arkady wants to say something. You said that you cannot exclude a human being. Arkady, whom would you? I want to ask a question. with this website case, if we transfer, I mean, if we allow algorithms to test layout, color, placing, why do we need a human being for the first version at all? Someone has to formulate the task. Somebody has to provide a. Why do we need a designer then? The one who says, I need new landing for a new product. Here you have short text about the product and numbers. Why can't we work with an algorithm from the very beginning, choosing buttons and colors and do A/B testing? Maybe you get it all very simple in your telecom. But the story about, create a text about a new product, somebody has to write this text, and somebody has to come up with a product, but it's not a designer. It's a product manager who's responsible, or the person who's in marketing who is responsible for this new product. So he's using some ephemeral system that Alex has now come up with. It gives a task, write me a text and corporate standards for this text. Why do we need a designer here in this? Where does the designer come? Alexei said you need a designer to make the first version, but you can eventually get a very different result in the end. So if you have an algorithm that will test and change, maybe the algorithm will select the best option. So my question is, why do you need the designer in the first place? I'm not asking about the text. I mean, why do we need a designer? Let us, make an experiment. Let us try it both ways. Maybe we don't need him. Based on experiment, I'm ready to change my opinion. The first experiment is how do we do without a designer, and the second one, entrust AI with creating a new banking product and generating products. Yes, AI. To come up with a new banking product for an AI is easier. This designer case is more interesting, judging from what Alexei has said. And if we judge from the length of people's hair, we are less creative. Alan and I, so I'm being pretty cynical about it. In fact, a couple of minutes later, we'll open our Q&A session. I'm sure you have some questions. But before we start, maybe we'll cover one more topic, perceiving AI instruments as a black box, and new trends in making AI more explainable, more interpretable, more clear, and to have control functions for it. Maxim, my question is to you in the first place. How do you, what practices do you have? What practices do you think of? What can we do not to make AI into a black box and build it on an open platform? Well, thank you. Even this previous discussion proves that the first and basic practice that helps us understand how AI works is proper management of our natural physical intelligence, because the interpretation problem and mistrust towards something complex, this is our natural-born intelligence. Humans are prone to look for the one responsible. For example, now we've been talking about the designer. You do need a designer. You need someone who's going to be responsible for it. It's not easy to blame a neural network for making decisions. And who's responsible in the end? When we're working with simple models, if we have a function y equals x plus b, the one who assesses a and b is the one to blame as a scapegoat. If the solution has been successful, then you have people who are, praised. Well, depending on the level of democracy in your organization. I mean, if it's a teamwork, then the team will be praised. However, you have to separate. If we don't understand why this application, how does it work? The application that works with your images, drawing them in different styles. I might not be happy with the way Van Gogh would see me, but I will never sue the developer of this application for making a silly picture of me. But if AI is gonna, make legal decisions, or in criminal law, for example, we might have a lot of people willing to understand where this decision came from. Speaking of banking, we have credit solutions, for example. And with credit solutions, we want to understand why do we reject some people and why do we give loans to other people. And the worst case is when we give loans to people who don't return money. We have customization. We have NLP models where it's not that important for us the way we interpret it, but it is the result that is important. So we need to develop a system of rules. We don't demand interpretability where it is not needed, and at the same time, we should not allow uninterpretable AI to work on the challenges or in the issues where we could be taken responsible for. All top conferences AI now feature sessions on interpreting of the deep learning models and the interpretations for these models. The more complex mathematics is, the more complex data, the bigger data is used, the more difficult it is to understand how we get through from data insights to decision-making point. We're talking about computing capacity to understand how a deep neural network works. You can enhance computational power to an extent which is still very far away. What about your legal? What about your legal personnel? Are they all automatized? No, we're friends with them. We're talking about physical intelligence. We're not trying to kick somebody out. We're not trying to robotize someone. What we want is we want to reduce time for, I don't know, a credit request, a credit inquiry. So part of the routine operations can be transferred to machine, and you can have a competent resource of lawyers. I mean, good lawyers are expensive, and you don't have many of those, like, just like dentists. But the question is, certain operations, certain issues can be solved through using an additional tool. For example, with once the automobile engine came up, you don't have any coaches. Uber works, driverless cars. Are they going to replace drivers? And Maxim has been talking about algorithms not being transparent. There's always a threat of ill use. My question is to George and to other colleagues. Today we heard in the morning. We heard that about if you don't accept it to an Ivy League university, you might not get a credit line. So how do we work with AI not to allow this to happen? Well, you're opening a huge Pandora box. We are moving towards ethics of AI. AI ethics is a threatening issue. The ethical base we use for AI, it is outdated. We are still using ethics, 2 millennia ethics, Christian ethics, thou shalt not kill, and the rest. But when you have a drone killing a terrorist in Pakistan, how does it correlate with today's ethics or the laws, the laws of robotics that were introduced or presented in 1980s that provide ethical basis for creation of robots? Because the drone, which is a robot killing a terrorist in Pakistan, does it have a moral right to do this? It's a very complex question, because ethical base that lies under robotics and AI development, I think it is outdated. In MIT, where I studied, the hottest profession today are specialists in ethics, in AI ethics. They're going to create future for us. So once you, if your son doesn't enter an Ivy League university, will it influence your credit history? Well, we'll see. Like the case I described about prediction of a girl dropping her boyfriend, who are we? I mean, is it ethical to use such an algorithm? Are we a higher authority using an algorithm? This is probably the main thing, or the main issue, the main challenge that AI is facing today, and something we should be thinking upon. Do we have the right to use this data? Do we have the right to use algorithms? Because the amount of data we have around us poses a lot of questions, and we don't have answers for them yet because ethical base is outdated.
Хорошую подсказку, что если не получается.
Thank you very much. You gave a hint that if the designers get no job, you can go work as an AI ethical expert, as a new direction. Ron, do you agree with George? Is there other correct tools today to evaluate, to assess the ethical compliance? Are there ethical rules today related to application with AI tools and international practice?
It goes back to the question of different cultures. So I think that each of us has some understanding of what we believe are ethical things, right? But we also have business ethics. We have what are the right things to do for our business. There are different cultures, have different feelings about what is ethical and what's not ethical. And so we were having this discussion before this panel started about can you divorce the algorithms from the ethics? And the algorithms are pure science, and the ethics are added on as according to laws, according to local mores, according to the rules of a society. And I think that is really the hardest part, is to try to get something that works. So in a bank, if I decline credit for somebody, it's maybe the right decision for the bank as a business, but maybe government views that as not the right answer for society as a whole, because things like in the U.S. we talk about redlining, areas that simply won't get loans to be able, because of where people live, because there's a predominance of low-income people or whatever. And so I think that we have to really go through a lot of process to try to make sure that we understand the algorithms that are going into AI and how they will be influenced or influence what is going to happen in the public space. And I know in some of our customers in China, our banking customers in China, are dealing with this right now because they have, the government has a view of what they want to happen with the growth of society, with the, various things. Everything becomes interrelated with, global warming, with the greenhouse gases, with the particulates that people are having to breathe. But there's the business ethics or the business imperatives on the banking side. So it becomes a very, very difficult conversation to have. And I think it's one where I think maybe the right answer is the designers all become ethicists, right? Because they have the right kind of a mindset, right? But I think that this is going to become one of the hardest things because in the banking industry, we're focused on efficiency, we're focused on customer experience, we're focused on trying to have new kinds of products that will appeal to people. But I think we don't very often deal with some of the ethical standards and some of the things that we can inadvertently impact. And so I think we're going to have to spend more time working on that.
Thank you. Я думаю, что вопрос связан.
Thank you very much. I believe the algorithmic ethics and the ethics of robotization is a huge issue. I believe we will have this in our Q&A session. I will open the Q&A session right now. We have a lot of time to ask a question. Please introduce yourselves and say who are you addressing. Vladimir Kurlyanchik, Arctic Technologies. This is a continuation of the discussion we are having now. There are examples, there are real working examples when ethical issues already happened, AI-related ethical issues. There are infos that Amazon closed a HR AI project because the AI started hiring males more than females. Then they changed the algorithm, but the algorithm, despite those changes, hired more males than females. And so this was not acceptable, and the project was closed. So the project was demoted to a support level. But what is interesting, that the problem got noticed, that the employees who are analyzing the algorithm, they identified an ethical issue. And for Amazon, this was an ethical issue they have to combat. And my question is to everyone sitting here in a panel, are there processes in place monitoring the output of AIs and monitoring the potential ethical issues related to AI? Because this has to be continuous monitoring, actually. I would like to know how and if this is in place. Your colleagues, please be brief. This discussion, this conversation is really good when it's theoretical, but when it becomes practical, when it relates, when it touches you, then we have a Lisa Alert project. We help people who are missing. We help to find people who are missing. Every year, 200,000 people go missing in forests, in cities. There are probably children who went away, or an elderly woman or man who just got lost in a city. And we use all sorts of algorithms, predictive metrics, helping to find those people. And Lisa Alert is the team of people who use it. We had a situation half a year ago, probably an elderly man left home in Moscow in winter and just left and never came back. So Moscow, December, minus 28 degrees centigrade. An 82-year-old person is outdoors. He has a phone in his pocket. We can track this man, and he will be found immediately, because we understand that he only has 4 hours to survive and under those temperatures. And this is the ethical issue. Do we have the right to track the location of this man so that he can be found? Maybe he does not want to be tracked. He does not want to be found. This is the same thing when a person is standing on the bridge and is ready to jump. Does an emergency car, an emergency official has the right to stop this man? And we all have an ethical committee dealing with those issues, but this is a totally different story when there's a company in California losing people. But imagine, this is your relative who will go missing in Moscow, and you won't be able to recover him in 4 years. This is a totally different story for you. I would like to add about the example with Amazon. I would regard it as a very good example, educative example. What we learned from this case, that Amazon has a monitoring process in place to monitor the AI-generated models and outputs. And these are not the data scientists who monitor this, but rather product managers, analysts, business analysts who monitor the outliers. And I think what we can learn from this, we need to take a look at those things. This is not a very developed field. This is a relatively young industry, and those failures are found continuously on and on every year, and we have to monitor this. This is what the lesson learned will be. Colleagues, we have time for yet another question. Now. Igor Sidorov, Nogoprint Holding. We talked a lot about ethics. Let's come back to technical issues. In the first sessions, we talked a lot about big data. Tons of papers, 1,000 tons of paper. My question to Dmitry and to everyone as well. Are those algorithms, big data processing algorithms, are big data processing algorithms using AI? What is the state of this market today? In the sales of those solutions and in the development of the solutions. I believe everyone has a reply ready. Thank you very much for these questions. Of course, yes. As I already mentioned some of the examples today, every AI has a huge array of data to function. So if there is a use case, AI could not exist without big data, without access to this big data. You always need to have a huge chunk of data for the model to be efficient and to perform well. We, as a company, in our systems we're creating, we have a target. Up to 80% of all the operations in our systems should be using AI. We are currently very near, we're currently practically reached this target. And to feed the system with data, we use the second trend we have not talked a lot today. This is the IoT, this is our Internet of Things. All the data fed into the system will be fed not by people like it is done now, but by devices themselves. And all the new things which we do, all the new products use big data, which are fed automatically without human involvement, and we use AI to 80%. However, currently AI only gives recommendations. It does not have a decision-making authority. The most responsible decisions are taken by humans. But the opinion of the AI is a recommendation for this. Two hype terms, artificial intelligence and big data. This is a combination, but when you combine it, nothing ever changes. Every application we've described in this panel could be marketed as artificial intelligence plus big data. Unfortunately, this does not concern blockchain because it's a whole other story, but every single application the recommendation engine, anti-spam, anti-fraud, the client predictions, client segmentation. It could be named both artificial intelligence, and depending on how big the data is and how honest, how sincere you are, you can also name it big data. When you have exabytes of data, this is of course big, but big data is a psychological thing. A database cannot fit into your machine. Is it the problem that your machine is small or you have too much data? So big data is something that we only have in our minds. Well, maybe my colleagues will correct me. And I think Arkady can name another story. Maxim, your last comment. I would like to correct here. When we sat with our data scientists and discussed what big data is when you have lots of strings, and complex data when you have a lot of columns. So 15 years ago, a computer scientist, data scientist had another profile in terms of hard skills. I won't promote proprietary software here. But it used the proprietary software and the data separately. And this has been integrated over the 15 years, and currently all the libraries of deep machine learning, I can name them because these are open source, like scikit-learn, PyTorch, TensorFlow. They all they are all related to a massive parallel computational system, like Hadoop or Spark, and it is installed on top of that. So I agree with Alexei. This is this is a single story. AI and big data. This is all about engineering data and transforming this data into some decisions, analytical decisions. I believe we could have talked about this for hours, but our organizers tell us that we are short of time. We still have two minutes. Final questions from the audience.
Look.
And be brief. Brevity is a precondition for a good answer. My question is to Alexei. If we talk about ethics as a function, when a data scientist who has to program certain parameters, how do we, calculate this ethics? How do we see this ethics to minimize the trouble? It's very short. I mean, I don't know. We need to experiment. It's yet to be tested. I think it's the best conclusion. There are no pills or golden pills that can give you relief. We need to experiment. We need to test. Thank you for enriching the data, not only of the telecom operators, but of the banks as well. And I want to thank our panelists and good Finopolis